820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Come for a family-friendly, fun-filled day of fitness and giving back. Join Chicagoland's largest 5K run to end homelessness at Chicago's beautiful Montrose Harbor on Saturday, July 14th at 8:30 a.m., benefiting a Safe Haven Foundation. Be a part of the solution. Register today. RunToEndHomelessness.org. That's RunToEndHomelessness.org.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Come for a family-friendly, fun-filled day of fitness and giving back. Join Chicagoland's largest 5K run to end homelessness at Chicago's beautiful Montrose Harbor on Saturday, July 14th at 8:30 a.m., benefiting a Safe Haven Foundation. Be a part of the solution. Register today. RunToEndHomelessness.org. That's RunToEndHomelessness.org.
The following program, To the Left, is sponsored by To the Left Media, LLC, and to the extent applicable, their guests. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of NewsWeb Radio Company or its management.
You're listening to WCPT's To the Left with Samina and Shauna. Here are our hosts, Shauna East and Sheila Olanaran.
Oh, that's pretty good. Who did that?
Thank
Wow.
you.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Thank you for tuning in to the Left. I am Shauna East, and today we have wonderful, amazing, magnificent
Oh, my.
guest co-host Sheila Garland Olanaran.
Yay.
First day on my own, so I'm like, oh, you did a great
Oh, hey, your mic's on.
boosting my ego and making me not want to throw up as much. Well, don't.
Hey, Deb.
We can hear you.
Lady B is out today, and I believe we have Devin. I
Hi,
think his
Devin.
name was. Sorry if that's wrong. So let's get started. Today is Madre's Day.
Yes, it is Mother's Day. Feliz Dia de las Madres in Espanol. So happy Mother's Day, everyone.
Happy Mother's Day, everyone. I want to give a shout out to my mom who lives out in Massachusetts, who is a fan of the show, Cheryl. So happy Mother's
Happy Mother's Day, Cheryl.
And so given the holiday today, we wanted to spend some time sort of talking about the people who shaped us, who raised us, who our influences were politically. So that's sort of the theme for today. And Samina is not in this week. She will be back next week. And next week is actually our last episode on WCPT.
Yeah.
So everybody mark your calendars.
It was a great run, Shauna.
Yeah, we're going to do an occasional podcast or something moving forward.
Yeah.
So we're not, don't
Count you out yet.
don't count us out. You'll
There's
still
so much
see
to
to the
do.
left,
Yes.
but we will no longer be with WCPT, unfortunately. But this was our choice, and we have a lot of stuff going on this summer and the rest of the year.
Yeah,
So
it's going to be a busy next year or two, huh?
Definitely.
Until 2020.
Yes,
Yes.
for sure, exactly.
For sure.
So the first thing that I wanted to mention as far as stuff that happened recently, I haven't been in the studio for a couple weeks, was just these heartbeat bills that have passed in Ohio and Georgia that effectively are, in my mind, an abortion ban, because they require that women seeking, reproductive health care consultations and or potentially an abortion have to know they're pregnant within 2 weeks of missing a period, and they have to have the abortion but within 2 weeks.
Right.
And that they are no longer eligible to have one in state if there is a fetal heartbeat.
Right. And if they go out of state,
If
the
they
law
go-
will affect them out of state.
Yes,
as well.
they can prosecute women who go out of state for reproductive health.
Exactly.
So they can put a woman in prison for life if she decides to go out of state to have an abortion, which we know that the wealthy women who go out of state, the wealthy white women in Georgia, I seriously doubt are going to have an issue. I feel like this is going to disproportionately affect poor women and women of color.
Access to reproductive health has always been a class issue in this country, as has the access to health care. So they really fall hand in hand. And these laws to limit women's ability to determine their own futures have been around forever. And it's an extraordinarily explosive and divisive issue in this country, just because of the history of the puritanical history, the origins of this country. And people hold on to it. But for me, it's really a way of controlling all of us. Because if you can control certain sections of society, then you can control all of us in the working class and how we determine our future. I mean, this is like training us to, to get in line and to not do the things that we know give us agency, right? And give us the ability to determine our own fate and our own futures. Much like housing and homelessness, right? We don't take over houses even though we need them. We've been very trained that we don't go against the law. And so these laws are very frightening. And I think the other part, because the Supreme Court is as conservative as it is, these laws are really designed to make a challenge to Roe versus Wade. So ultimately, all of these will find themselves, I guess, unless we come up with some other strategies, which I think we have to, because if we don't, we can't rely on the Supreme Court to be sane in this issue.
Yeah, I really am hoping that there's a way that we can work on some serious strategies, and that I don't want this to be considered a women's issue. This is an issue that everybody should be fighting against. Yeah. It definitely is being manufactured to be sent to the Supreme Court, which is scary because we know how conservative it is right now.
And that it will be for years to come. And in fact, the Supreme Court is not the arena of reprieve that it had held for us historically. I mean, we're seeing a completely different sort of way of operating that gives us no recourse. So that means we have to figure out our recourse ourselves, as a class and as a people and as workers and mothers and students. We have to come together and really figure out what kind of society we want, because this isn't it. It's not for me. And I can't imagine for the millions of people that are affected in every single way that this is society they signed up for. I just can't imagine.
So I definitely wanted to mention that at the top of the show.
I'm glad you did,
Because, it's Mother's Day, and if we care about women...
Exactly. So the stores are making bank today.
Yeah.
But yet we've got laws that say women are useless and worthless.
Right.
I mean, come on now. If we can't see the hypocrisy in that and just the danger in that, then we got to figure out another way to celebrate Mother's Day.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe going back to its origins. We'll talk about that later.
So, and then I know you've been keeping up on the situation down in Venezuela, and you wanted to say a few words about that.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to follow what's happening internationally because it has an impact. It's connected. And we begin to see, what the political tactics are of the ruling class in this country and internationally. But for people who don't know, right now there is a battle that the United States, Trump, has inserted itself in. And it's not just Trump. It has a legacy. It has legs from years before when Chavez actually became president of Venezuela. But there are people that I know who have been on the ground and who are on the ground in Venezuela, and they say that the people of Venezuela are committed to the Venezuelan revolution, and they are committed to Maduro, and that they are the majority of the population. And in fact, what's created, if you hear reports about shortages of food and those sorts of things, it's because of the embargo that the United States has placed on Venezuela. So this is what's driving the economic instability. It's totally being manufactured by the United States. We've seen this playbook many times. And so in an effort to sort of destabilize the economy and society, it gives an opportunity in that upheaval to try to come in and change the political order. We saw it in Chile back in the 1980s. I mean, we see this playbook. We know Milton Friedman from the University of Chicago, and we should be aware that this is what's happening. And so it's the embargo, but it's the people in Venezuela who continue to support their liberation, what they've been able to win under Chavez and now being continued under Maduro. And this guy, Guaido, who has been set up by the United States, interestingly enough, hasn't even been arrested by the Venezuelan government at this point, which gives you kind of an eye into, that it's not this horrible dictatorship that they try to say that it is. And that if you really want to talk about a dictatorship, we really need to look at who are the true dictators of the world.
Well, they're bringing up the nasty S word, socialism.
Oh, well, that's the thing that gets us shaking in our boots, right? And that gets us going. Socialism, race, gender, all these identity issues that get us off track. So I just wanted to say that about Venezuela. There's been, absolute proof showing that the United States is playing a very duplicitous role in this issue. A lot of the footage that was being broadcast around the world was shown to actually be the United States and its forces destroying food, destroying things that were supposed to be for the Venezuelan people. But I think the most important thing is, what do the Venezuelan people want? And what the Venezuelan people are saying is that they want what they fought for, an end to the kind of grinding poverty that they lived under for so many years. And they don't want the oil to be controlled by the United States and these cabals around the world, that they want to be able to determine for themselves how that money is used. Because I think one of the first things Trump did was that they froze all their assets so that they couldn't use the money to help the people in Venezuela because of the embargo. So
yeah, they're manufacturing a crisis, and then they're saying, oh, we tried to send humanitarian aid in, but the dictator Maduro wouldn't do it. He wouldn't take it, and so he's hurting his people. And that's what you're going to hear on the mainstream media, and it is not true.
It's not.
And a lot of progressives in Venezuela have been critical of Maduro. They don't think he's the best, but they believe that it is up to the Venezuelan people to, change leadership democratically.
Exactly. And in fact, every single voting rights organization in the world that went in and observed the elections in Venezuela said that Venezuela had the most democratic voting process they had ever seen in the world. Certainly, you can't compare anything that happens in this country to what Venezuela was able to do in the most transparent and democratic voting process in the world. So that's really saying something about their commitment, to democracy and to really the transparency of the government. And it's the system, it's the agenda. It's what does the leader stand upon? And I think that's so far that's what Maduro has done. He has actually ruled, but there have been, obviously I'm not going to go into all the details now. We don't have that kind of time. But the people of Venezuela want to determine for themselves what kind of country they want to live in. And the majority have spoken and are speaking.
Yeah, for sure. So important to read up a little bit more, dig for some more info on Venezuela. I recommend Democracy Now! Has been having some pretty fair coverage on the issue.
It has been good. Yeah.
So a little bit later, our call-in guests today are going to be my dad, Yay. Mike East. So excited to ask him a few questions. If you're listening, Dad.
Can't wait to get him on the phone.
And then, so he's been a big influence of me. So that was one reason I wanted him on. And then, he raised us as a single dad. So an interesting twist on Mother's Day. And then Sharon Sanders has been like a movement mom to me, along with Sheila. That's why I wanted you to be on too.
Oh, thank you, Shauna.
So we're going to call Sharon Sanders a little bit later. Just a couple minutes left. I wanted to touch upon, you wanted to bring up some, there's been a high rate of murders in the Rust Belt recently.
Well, yeah, so it was really interesting because the narrative that we often hear is that the violence in the African American community is out of control, particularly in Chicago. We hear it in all the urban cities. We talk about, how black families, how black folks can't seem to get their crap together and stop the violence. But there was an article that was published in the New York Times, I think it was September 2018, that talks about the rising murder rates in the Rust Belt and in cities and little locations that you don't often think of that are predominantly white. But the thing that kind of unifies this question around rising violence is what's happening in the economy. And I'm from Flint, Michigan, and I know people are from, Rockford and Youngstown and Gary and all these places that were former, booming industrial cities that have just fallen away. And we get some of the most horrible kind of industry and work and low wages and all of the things that are attendant to that, along with opioids, drugs. So all of the ills that we see in the urban centers, we're seeing in these small little locations around the Rust Belt. In addition to that, we're seeing an increasing murder rates. And so we have to have a different conversation, I think, about what drives the kind of violence that we're seeing in communities, and what's the underlying, reasoning for that. Because to me, I'm kind of paraphrasing what Nelson Mandela said decades ago, but poverty is created by men, and it's something that can be resolved. Poverty is not a failing of an individual, but it's a failing of an entire system within which men have the ability to change. So I kind of stolen a little bit from Nelson Mandela.
So I definitely want to read this article. It's called "Why Are Murder Rates So High in the Rust Belt?" And it was in the New York Times, September 4th. 2018. So I'll post the link on the live stream later. We have to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we will have my dad, Michael East, on for a little bit. So we'll be right back. You're listening to the Left.
I'm Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
We're producing a show on WCPT Sundays at 1 o'clock.
What should we call it?
How about Smash the Patriarchy?
I like it, but that's a lot of pressure. What about left-leaning ladies?
What about woman-splaining?
Yeah, but what about when we have guys on? What about Madigan's worst nightmare?
He gets enough attention.
I got it. To the left.
I like that. That could work.
Tune in to the left with Samina and Shauna on WCPT 820, Sundays at 1.
And we're back.
All right.
Thank you for tuning into To the Left. I am Shauna East, and who are you?
Sheila Garland Olaniran.
And we're here on Mother's Day talking about the people who influenced us, and I would like to bring my pops, Michael East, on to the... Dad, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Dad.
Hi, Mike.
Hi there.
This is my co-host today, Sheila. And we are in the studio, and we are talking about the people who influenced us. And believe it or not, a lot of people ask me, since I've been involved in politics, who my influences were growing up. And I have to say, you were an influence, Dad. Isn't that funny?
You saw me perusing Marx and Engels or something?
Oh, I love it. Go
No,
ahead.
I saw you perusing the newspaper every day. And so you weren't like super politically active, but you were always a rebel and you were always very anti-establishment.
Well, you know, the man's been on me for a long time.
So I just wanted to ask you, like, who your influences are. Why did you end up, you know, sort of being skeptical of the system?
Well, I just, you know, I you know, when you're growing up, when you're real young and you're, you know, pledging the allegiance to the flag and all this stuff, you get kind of, you know, sold a bill of goods that aren't necessarily what's actually going on.
So what did you do when they had you stand for the pledge?
Oh, you had a knuckle under back in those days, or else they'd paddle you.
That's
Yeah,
true.
because you went to Catholic school, right?
No, that was in public
No,
school.
I went to catechism at Catholic school, but my regular school was always public school.
So did you know that I wouldn't stand for the pledge in elementary school? I don't think I ever told you that.
No, I don't think I ever heard that.
So it must have been a genetic thing.
I don't know.
And then, so I also wanted to ask, so my mom moved out to the East Coast when I was about 8, and so you were a single dad for my formative years.
Do you mean when your mom ran away from home?
So just so you know, Mom listens to the show.
Oh, okay.
But anyways, I just wanted to know what it was like raising a daughter as a single dad.
Well, you know, when your mom first left, I know that was kind of, you know, a big deal, you know, kind of the, you know, explosion of the nuclear family or whatever. But what I was really worried about was your sister being gone.
Mm-hmm. What worried you about that?
Well, because you were like the big sister, and your, you know, little sister was taken away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I express anything about that at the time? Because lately I was just thinking about that, and I feel like that was something that I...
Well, Shauna, you were 7 years old, you know, right?
Yeah.
So
what were some obstacles being, like one thing I remember when I told you that I had my ladies' time for the first time, that was a bit awkward.
Oh, I don't recollect that.
You blocked it out.
Did we have to make an emergency run to Walgreens?
No, I had to run to the Lake Bluff pharmacy. I was like, Dad, I need money. And you were like, what for? And I'm like, I just need money. And you're like, what is it for? And I'm like, I got my period. And then you were like, just take it. Just take it.
Did I hand it over?
Yeah, yes. But you didn't want anything to do with it.
I put my Marx and Engels down and handed you my billfold.
So we only have a minute left, but did Sheila wanted to ask you something?
No, he's mentioned Marx and Engels twice. I'm like,
I think he's just teasing.
I'm intrigued. So Mike, Shauna is just an incredible human being. So what do you think was the kind of the winning formula for your interactions with her as she was growing up? If you had to point to one thing.
Well, she was always, you know, smarter than the average bear, as Yogi Bear would say.
That's for sure. So that helped.
I don't know. She just organically turned out the way she is. I can't, you know, explain it, you know.
So I think like my biggest influences growing up were my dad. You know, he taught me really smart, street smart kind of lessons early on. Like when we went to the grocery store, he's like, okay, look at the unit price. You know, they're going to try to, you know, jack up the price. So you got to look at that. You know, he taught me like some skills that they don't teach you in school. And his anti-establishment bent, I think, made me sort of skeptical of people in power.
When you're poor, you got to look out for unit pricing.
Right. And then I also wanted to say we lived in a housing complex in Lake Bluff, and I think another one of my biggest influences was us sort of being different than the folks around us and just seeing sort of the disparity between our family and like the people around us who were so wealthy that they didn't, they had more money than they knew what to do with.
you sure hit the nail on the head with that one. But I mean, living in a housing project in the leafy North Shore of Lake Bluff. I mean, I think the average. I mean, even back in the 80s, they were they're making six-figure incomes, and we were considerably below that.
Yeah. So I think just seeing that, I thought we were just as good as them, and why didn't we have the things, why did we have to struggle and those folks didn't? I think that was a big influence.
Yeah.
I was lucky to go to good schools. I think that was definitely a benefit because I had a lot of teachers over the years that really liked me and mentored me. And
that's because the wealthier school districts have a lot more resources.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I feel lucky that we, grew up there, even though I felt like an alien most of the time.
The alternative would have been Lynn, Massachusetts, and I wasn't going to let that happen.
No. Well, Dad, Sheila, did you have anything last thoughts?
I know we've had a couple of near misses in terms of meeting each other, Michael. So hopefully one day soon we can break open a can or pop a cork and
we can sit in the parking lot over there on Milwaukee Avenue and have a couple of brewskis.
Sit in the parking lot, okay.
That's how my dad rolls.
That's how he rolls.
All right, Dad, I love you, and I'm really glad you came on and came out of your comfort zone to be a part of my show while we're still on WCPT. Yeah. And have a happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, Mike.
Thank you, Sheila. And thank you, Shauna.
Bye. Talk to you later.
Bye. Oh, that was great.
What do you think?
Your dad is cool. Your dad is way cool.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can see. I got to meet him.
He's a little rascal.
I can see that.
I'm glad he answered the questions more straightforward. I was worried he was going to be a smart aleck.
Well, there's a little bit of that.
But he's quite the smart aleck.
There was a little bit of that seeping in.
Yeah, so we just talked to my dad, who, I was saying was such an influence on me, and I know you've had some amazing influences to make you the awesome, amazing person that we know and love. So did you want to give a shout out to any of those folks who...
Yeah, I think there are women... I want to go all the way back to when I was in my 20s. I remember the first time I was invited to speak publicly. This was in Birmingham, Alabama, because I went to school in Tuscaloosa. And I peppered my talk with a lot of profanity because I thought that made me sound more militant. And when I finished, nobody interrupted me. Everybody listened. There were all these kind of, older people and whatever. And Miss McKinney, who I'd been working with, and that's all if you asked me her entire name, I could not tell you, but her name was Miss McKinney. And she was old when I met her. And she came to me, she said, well, baby, that was a really good talk. I'm not exactly sure what you were saying, but... maybe you want to dial back on some of that there profanity. And it was a teachable moment. And it really taught me about being respectful to community and other people and not being so in yourself. Mm-hmm. Like it's not about me. It's about who are the people that I'm interacting with and that we're interacting together in a space that's respectful for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that was a really important lesson that Miss McKinney taught me. She's gone on. This was down in Birmingham, Alabama. And then I worked with a lot of really good people. I remember, kind of studying, and I don't know if Jill is listening, Jill Gamel. She was incredible, brilliant woman, taught me a lot. We studied together for about a year and a half, just reading everything, history, everything. She was incredible. When you start naming names, you always miss somebody. And then there was a young woman, her name, at the time, she had changed her name to Yananita, and she was beautiful. And Yananita taught me, she was an amazing organizer and taught me a lot. And then back in Michigan, Claire McClinton in Flint, oh my God, she became an electrician, and she worked at one of the GM plants. and she taught me how to write the most kick-ass flyers. Oh, excuse me, the most kick-butt flyers. And really how to think about how do you organize and what is it that you're trying to accomplish. There are so many. Fran Cleaves, who's gone on, she was an amazing mentor who, I mean, she was like gangbusters. You know, that's kind of where I gained like that confidence to just do the thing, right? Don't sit and think about, is this the right thing to do? Because if your gut tells you that it's the right thing to do, if you do it in a disciplined way, it's the right thing to do. She was incredible.
What was your own mom like?
My mom was, I think I've told this story. My parents were refugees from the South. They ended up in Flint, Michigan. They got there on the back of a migrant truck, picking vegetables along the way. My mother was very young when she left home. She was like 13 or 14, and that was not uncommon. So that meant she was relatively uneducated, but she was formidable. She literally, I heard Penny screaming. My mother could take a penny and stretch it so far, I could hear it crying, like blocks away. But she was just she had a deadpan sense of humor, but she was very crafty. You know, like she would sew all of our clothes, and she would cook all of our food from scratch, and she would garden, and she would just make life really pleasant. There was always music, and you know, she was just this incredible woman who, you know, could be very deadpan. She was a great mimic. I can't mimic like she does, but she would do everyone's voice. It was
like
hysterical. She's like an impersonator. She was funny as heck. She could hit a baseball. She couldn't run because she was top heavy, but she could hit a baseball, and we would run for her. Vira,
and you said she did music.
She played guitar.
A lot of times, people who are musicians are really good at impersonating because I think they hear the tones and then
they can do it.
Yeah.
She played the guitar, and so she made me play piano. I remember being 10 years old, walking home from school, and my mother sort of meeting me in the car saying, "I got a surprise for you." And when I got to the house, there was a piano sitting there in the living room. It was great. Yeah. She was an incredible mom, but and there were 4 of us, so I would tell her, I said, "Why did you have so many people?" She said, "Well, you should be happy I kept trying, because if I hadn't, you wouldn't be here." So I would always tell her that. But she's passed on now. It's been a few years since she's gone on to wherever we go after we finish here.
So when I grew up, we hardly ever talked about women in school. I grew up with my dad. I had a brother. I didn't have any other siblings in the house after my mom left. And yeah, it was really hard being a girl and having no woman to talk to about the things that were happening to my body and what I was going through, and relationships when I started having those. And it was really, I feel like it wasn't even really until like my 30s that I started, you know, having friendships and, you know, adult relationships with other women that I really admired. And I just wished like I had this when I was younger, and maybe I would have felt more free to do more things if I saw other women, you know, sort of soaring, you know.
Interesting.
So like when I see Ilhan Omar and Representative Ocasio-Cortez in D.C., I am just like, you know, because I can only imagine as a girl seeing women like in the halls of power and really being outspoken, and how that might impact you. And I really wish I had that. It's really funny, actually. They're going to laugh. My number one female role model when I was growing up was Madonna.
I'm not going to laugh.
Like, I loved her. I had every picture of her. I had like 500 pictures of her in my room. I used to collect them, and every time she would have some sort of like controversy she was pushing, and she would like just go on the air and do it. Like she had the black man as Jesus in her like a prayer video, and then she would get on Dateline TV that night, and she would be very outspoken, speaking her mind, you know, talking about why this is wrong, that this is controversial. And I like admired that so much, but really there weren't that many people like that.
Yeah, you know, she's from Saginaw, Michigan.
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
of
I'm
course.
sure you did, of course.
So I'm not really that much of a fan of the later Madonna, but when I was, in the 80s, when I was a kid and, in my adolescent years, I absolutely loved her.
Yeah, when she first started, she was very incredible. It's hard to grow up in those, auto towns or grow up in someplace like Michigan and not have a sense of something. And I think she certainly had that.
And she also her mom died when she was young, so I felt like
there was
a kinship. Yeah. So I like the women who are able to push the envelope and be fearless. I think was attractive to me.
Yeah. It's incredible. There are so many women out there that, I think get overlooked, like, as you say, in our society, in our patriarchal society. But I'm so thankful that I had all these incredible women. I mean, and I look at some of the young women that are coming up, too, that influence me, like you, of course, Shauna, and, like Olga Bautista. And, there are a lot of young women that are coming along, April. I mean, I can name a lot of folks that really influence me and make me think about things from a different perspective. And I think we have to be lifelong learners and not close the door to people just because they might be younger or have had a different experience, because otherwise, how do we, sort of grow not only as an individual, as a person, but as community? And I love this idea of a community of women. I had an older sister, my mom, I always had, a community of girlfriends. So that was important to me. And I think you're right. It does kind of shape who we are and how we think about ourselves in terms of being confident as women.
So everyone, we are celebrating Mother's Day here by talking about the folks who influenced us and made an impact on us. We're going to take a quick break before we have our next guest, Sharon Sanders. Thank you for listening to the Left or watching it on Facebook Live, and we'll be right back.
I'm Samina Mustafa.
I'm Shauna East.
We're producing a show on WCPT Sundays at 1 o'clock.
What should we call it?
How about Smash the Patriarchy?
I like it, but that's a lot of pressure. What about left-leaning ladies?
What about woman-splaining?
Yeah, but what about when we have guys on? What about Madigan's worst nightmare?
He gets enough attention.
I got it. To the left.
I like that. That could work.
Tune in to the Left with Samina and Shauna on WCPT 820, Sundays at 1.
Welcome back, world.
Yes. Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day. I'm your host of To the Left, Shauna East, and in studio we have our guest co-host today, Sheila Garland Olanaran.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
So we're talking about folks who made an impact on us growing up and who continue to make an impact on us as adults.
Mm-hmm.
And we are really excited to have our guest, Sharon Sanders, activist extraordinaire and organizer, on the line. Sharon, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
Happy
Hi,
Mother's
Sheila
Day.
Same to you.
If anyone
very important day.
If anyone has a question or comment for anyone, Sheila, Sharon, or myself, feel free to comment it on our live stream on the To the Left with Samina and Shauna Facebook page, and I will mention it if I see it. And turning to Sharon, though. Sharon, I wanted to have you on because I love you. And
I know. Same here.
And I really admire, I think we're really alike in a lot of ways. I see you organizing these important events that bring people together around a variety of issues, and that's sort of like what I've been doing even before I knew you, and I admire your persistence, and you keep going, and every time I say, you know, what's the point? I can't do this anymore. Then I just think, but Sharon Sanders is still out there fighting.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It means
So that keeps me going.
That's wonderful to hear. And that keeps me going by you saying that.
So you've been very politically active for a long time. I don't want to say how many years, but I just was curious as to who your influences were growing up.
Well, I really have thought about that, and I think Gloria Steinem is more my peer, and I admired her because she was her own person. But I think Eleanor Roosevelt, who had she had a tough time with her hubby there, and yet she was able to work through all those obstacles to be such an important figure for the women's movement. I mean, I've read so much about her, and I just think she was exactly how I would want to be. And she was my main role model.
And Sharon, you're quite the rebel, though, I must say, a lot like my dad in that way. What shaped your sort of view of the political, landscape and our, government, and what shaped your politics?
Well, it's a long story, which we don't have much time for, so I'll try to make it real brief. I was brought up in a house where my father was a Republican Jew, unheard of at that time, and my mother was a communist, actually. Oh. And so the arguments at the dinner table used to be incredible, and my dad always won because he was a man. Literally.
Wow.
So that used to really, really upset me. And my dad was for Nixon, which made no sense to me. And I think I used to sit there and get in, listen for a while, and then I got into these massive arguments about it. Because my dad didn't vote, which drove me crazy, because I was raised that you have an obligation in a democracy to vote. That's part of your citizenship heritage. And he said, it doesn't matter. And I said, Dad, but then you don't have a right to complain. So we used to go on and on about that. And through the years, I think because of the Holocaust, it was such an astounding thing, because I was born right after that period, that anything like this could happen to people. I mean, genocide has gone on forever. We know that. But the Holocaust was something that has stayed with me forever. And I began to realize this could happen again if we're not careful. Mm. And I would watch, the McCarthy hearings. I'd run home from school and watch that. And I'd say, oh, my God, people can lose their jobs because of their political views. All this was shocking to me. And lo and behold, Roy Cohn, who was, the attorney for McCarthy, was the one that Trump admires. That's who he bases his whole philosophy on. So this became part of my being. I mean, everybody in school knew that I was a political person. Many incidents along the way. I was in the League of Women Voters as I grew up. I was involved in that, community organizing, standing up for the average citizen, because to me, you can't have a democracy unless everybody is allowed to participate in it.
Do you feel like you got that from your mom then, because your dad didn't vote? Was that more from your mom's side?
I would say that my mother was not a fighter, so she let my dad sort of win. And I have been a fighter. You're born a certain way. You're 50-50. You part your 50% your parents and 50% who you are. Mm-hmm. And I was just born to not take anything from anybody. I mean, no matter when. Years later, when I was a special ed teacher and the principal was not doing things according to the laws of special education, I would go in there and I'd say to her, you can't do this. And if you do it, she put in 18 kids in a class that only was legally allowed to have 12. And I'd say, you can't do it. And she would say, if you do anything, I'll threaten you. Well, the minute anybody would threaten me, then, the fire would come raging out of me.
Watch out, world.
Yeah, and I think we as women, and I see this with the younger generation, and Shauna, you know how much I love the younger generation. They're my inspiration now, is that we have to not be intimidated by other women or men and stand firm for what we believe. And I will make a comment, though, since I know I'm going to run out of time. Excuse me. But I'm watching what goes on in Washington and statewide and also at the local level, and totally dismayed to see this country fall apart into the hands of the alt-right. Democrats are not perfect. They need to not rely on corporate money, but we need to stand up now, right now, for this Constitution and for the democracy. So that's really where I'm at. I've come, all the way, all those years to what I dreaded when I was a kid, the John Birch Society and the Koch brothers and all that. And we've moved to that, and right now I'm in fighting mood. We have to take this country back. And I think if enough women get involved, even more than the men, we can do it.
I mean, yeah, the Chinese had a saying, women hold up half the sky, right? So obviously and there's been, just a lot of commentary about the role of women in ending some of the stuff that we see going on in our society. But Sharon, you and I go back quite a ways too. Fighting around healthcare. I'm sorry?
I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
I said you and I go back quite a ways as well.
Oh, my God. And are you a fighter, Sheila? I'm always calling you to try to get you to do an event that I'm having because you were such an effective speaker. So, and you have done some, and I know you're working so hard with national nurses and the SEIU. And so, yes, you are an inspiration for so many women, and I admire you for that.
True
and
that.
We have a lot of people out there.
I think we live in times that are inspiring if people are open to that. And I think that there are people who end up being sort of like that sounding board so that we can, look at what they're doing. And I think you represent that for a lot of people, Sharon, because you have been, absolutely in the trenches in many different ways, on many different levels, and open to, just whatever new ideas are coming out. And so I think one of the things that you talked a lot about, Eleanor Roosevelt in particular. I know in the African American community, Eleanor Roosevelt is kind of a sacred name for those folks that are a generation above me and a few. And so to, hear you sort of talk about her, it makes me think about a lot of things. And I know you've talked about your home life and all of that. What is the thing today that kind of gets you going in the mornings? And you kind of hit on it, but yeah.
Yeah, I always say Trump Coke because I don't think the Trump alone he's not the problem. He's what has happened as a result of what's been created over the years, the last 50 or 60 years. That gets me up every single morning. Like, what are they going to pull today? What are we going to fight what's happening? Because I think we absolutely cannot stand there and say we're going to just sit by and wait for the next election because we can't. So, of course, my goal, as Shauna knows, is to have a coalition of all these groups working on their great issues, and those at the top running them come together and say, okay, we're going to do protests, we're going to have conventions, we're going to work together, we're not going to do infighting. That's my goal every single day. We're not going to infight. We know there's differences. That's the great thing about progressives. They're not all the same. And we have to respect those differences. And if we do something soon, I think we're in, we have a real constitutional crisis, and I think that Trump is unfit to be president mentally, emotionally, and so I worry about that every single day. Yeah. That what will he do to get the attention away from his misdeeds? How many wars are we going to start so that we don't watch him?
And
every day I worry about it.
One last thing I wanted to mention before we have to go, Sharon, and I want you to get back to your family because it's Mother's Day and we're taking you away from them. But I just wanted to say thank you because, you're, again, a mentor and someone who is always fostering the next generation of people to come in and, all work together. And I really admire that. And I've, taken it to heart in my own organizing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you, Shauna. And, we're such good friends. Or she calls me her political mother. Mom, everybody says to me, is that really your mother? Your mother? But it's true because I love the young people. I have 8 grandkids, and I adore each and every one of them. Oh. And, we have to respect the young ones and give them a future. We have to help them get a future. Yeah. I know, Sheila, you feel the same way.
Absolutely.
And I know you've got a fabulous hubby there who goes along with you too.
Well, I'm not married yet, Sharon. Don't
honey bunny, not
don't marry
hubby.
me off yet.
Oh, okay. I see a lot of reference to him, and you just, you know.
He has to put a ring on it still.
Oh, okay, sorry. But I love you both, and I admire you both.
Yeah, for sure.
And hopefully we can work a lot together. I'm hopefully age is not going to get in my way. Is what I'm hoping.
Well, it hasn't too much so far, so knock on wood.
I'm lucky. I'm
Sharon,
very lucky.
Yeah, you have tremendous energy, and and I think that energy, your political beliefs and your commitment to this fight is what keeps you young and drives you. And it's something, yeah.
The last comment, though, regarding that we cannot have a democracy unless every single group is included. That's that's my thing that bothers me. Inclusion. Mm-hmm. Coming together. You can't say, oh, we're a democracy except for certain people. No, we're all a democracy, no matter who we are. We live in this country. We should have equal rights. So I don't want to keep you anymore, and I know my time is up. So I want to thank you so much for allowing me to come on your show, and I hope to see both of you very soon.
I'll see you tomorrow, actually.
Yes, you will. I didn't know if I should say that, but yes, you will. I have not forgotten.
All right. Well, I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Happy Mother's Day,
Happy Mother's
Sharon.
Day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You too.
See
Bye-bye.
you in the fight.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, that's so cool.
I used to also say that I used to call you Mom, but then I realized you're more like a big sis.
Oh, no, I'm old enough to be your
mom.
mom.
But you have such a youthful energy, like sometimes like...
You forget.
No, you just don't, I don't know. I think you're my big sis now.
Okay, well, I can go for that little sis, mi hermanita.
So...
I think I overlooked somebody when I was giving shout-outs earlier. I don't want to overlook is Joyce Brody. Joyce, if you're listening, you inspire me. To not to be healthy, number one, but to really think about where we are as a country, as a society. I mean, this woman has so much energy. She just runs circles around people half her age, and she's brilliant. She understands strategies. Her politics are spot on most of the time. And she's one of these people like Sharon was talking about. Like, how do you open it up so that everybody can engage us? That's her. That's
true.
Really Joyce. She opens it. You cannot be in her presence and feel like I'm locked out or I'm in the presence of somebody who's going to shout me down or, you know what I'm saying? She's one of these people who really teaches and inspires us to like embrace the new and what's coming at us and figuring out how we do that. So, Joyce, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joyce.
And happy Mother's Day.
I'm just getting to know you better recently since I started working with the Poor People's Campaign, but I also, admire you, and I'm really glad to get to work with you.
Yeah.
So happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
And we have a comment from Karen Hayduk on our live stream, and she's saying that she loves Sheila. So
Karen is from Florida. Oh my God. Hi, Karen. Happy Mother's Day. Aww.
So if anyone else has any last comments or anything for us, we are on Facebook Live on the To the Left with Samina and Shauna Facebook page, and you're listening to us on 8:20 a.m. WCPT. And I just wanted to... We have just a minute left, but do you want to plug any upcoming event before we say goodbye?
Yes. Everyone knows that we've been making, as a country, some tremendous progress around healthcare for all, Medicare for all. And we actually had the Medicare for All bill heard in the Rules Committee, what is that, a week ago? Mm-hmm. And it looks like it's now going to go to the Ways and Means Committee, which is the Committee of Jurisdiction, based on a lot of phenomenal work that a lot of people have been doing. And to that end, there will be a Medicare for All event and action in Chicago on Saturday, June 8th. We will be gathering at 1:30 p.m. at the Blue Cross Blue Shield building there on Randolph. And we are looking to have an extraordinary local event that really highlights the folks that have been fighting around this issue in Illinois. When the Affordable Care Act passed, there are over 1 million people that are undocumented that were left out, even though there was an expansion of Medicaid. It's still very difficult because that has now been privatized. So that means that people have difficulty getting access to health care just across the board. So June 8th, put that on your calendar, 1:30 at the Blue Cross Blue Shield building on Randolph downtown there.
So when I get to a computer, there's 2 links I'm going to share on the live stream. One is the New York Times article, Why Are Murder Rates So High in the Rust Belt, that Sheila mentioned earlier, and I will try to find something related to the Medicare for All event on June 8th.
Yes.
So everybody please go to that. And just a preview of next week, which, you know, I'm sad to say for all of our fans that it's our last week on WCPT next Sunday, May 19th. Don't fret, though. Me and Samina are not out of the journalism game. We're going to have a podcast or something moving forward. We just need to figure that out still, but we will not be on WCPT Sundays at 1 anymore, so I'm sorry. But our last week on the show, we will have Tanya Watkins of Southsiders Organized for Unity and Liberation, and we will have Keena Collins, activist, and we are looking forward to that conversation. Samina will be back for the last episode, of course. Yep. And maybe she'll announce that she's running for Congress.
Uh-oh.
No, I don't know. Just saying. Maybe. It's a maybe.
You put a lot of pressure on her right now, Shauna.
I say this every week.
I know. The pressure. Oh, my God.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so we have a bit, we love you guys. We want you to keep listening once we get our podcast going. And, it's been a really great run, and we appreciate WCPT for having us, and there's just a lot going on with the 2020 elections coming up and some other stuff, some ambitious goals, personal goals that I might be trying to accomplish.
Oh, well, we're going to have to talk after the show, Shauna.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Listening to the Left. I am Shauna East.
And Sheila Garland, Olani Ron.
And we will see you next week for our final episode on WCPT.
And again, happy Mother's Day to everyone.
Happy Mother's Day.
Bye.